All right, and welcome to Partnering for Cybersecurity with Cold & Company. So the purpose of our presentation today is to talk about the cybersecurity landscape, which we feel is pretty daunting. There'll be some details on that in the coming slides here, but also to introduce a new service that we have called our vCISO service. We'll talk about that as we get going here. Just to give you some background here, at Cold & Company, we've spent the majority of 2023 on a project that we called Reimagining Cold & Company. We've been in business for 20 years now. Sometimes you do things a certain way because that's the way you've always done it. And being in the cybersecurity field, things change very rapidly. So we wanted to really evaluate what we were doing, not just cybersecurity. We evaluated everything, our internal processes and procedures. But one of the major takeaways was that we needed to increase our focus on cybersecurity as a result of the threat landscape that's out there. And that resulted in some changes. You probably noticed that we did a change out on our endpoint detection product to Sentinel-1. Sentinel-1 is the top rated endpoint detection product in its field. The product we were using previously was also well rated, but just given the threat, we thought the change to Sentinel-1 was prudent. Developing this service is another one of the changes that we came up with during that process. And in general, we felt like we needed to do a better job communicating the cybersecurity threats out there to our customers. We see it because it's our business and it's in our news feeds every morning. But you probably don't see it because you're working in a different industry and you're worried about your industry. That's our job, right? To worry about cybersecurity. So we need to do a better job of communicating that, and that's part of what today is all about here. All right, so I'm going to breeze through this slide because everyone on this presentation is already a Cold & Company customer, so you already know who we are. Just a couple key points there. We are certified in data security as well as business continuity. And in the left-hand side of this slide, you'll see that we have been repeat winners of the MSP 501 award. So we're pretty proud of that. So we do like to mention that. That's an independent organization that evaluates managed services providers like us based on your business practices. We're one of the smaller MSPs in that list, and it is a global competition. So out of the 500 top MSPs, probably 320 of them are US based, but there are MSPs from Australia, Germany, all over the place. But we've been repeat winners of that award for many years now and very proud of that. Our agenda for today is we're going to talk about the cybersecurity landscape. Give you some scary statistics there. We'll talk about the compliance landscape and then talk about why partnering for cybersecurity could be a good idea. And we're going to introduce our vCISO service, Virtual Chief Information Security Officer. We're going to give you a high-level overview of that. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty on it, more or less just kind of present the idea to you and see if it piques your interest. And of course, we'll finish up with some question and answer at the end. Okay, so diving into the cybersecurity landscape here, I'm first going to open up a poll question here, start with an easy one. And this is, do you have cyber liability insurance? So go ahead and answer that, and I'll continue talking on the slide here. So the cybersecurity landscape is as dangerous today as I've ever seen it, and that's not hyperbole. According to SonicWall, malicious actors launched 20 ransomware attacks per second on average in 2023. Think about that for a moment. Ransomware is still a major threat. You know, it's not making the nightly news as much as it may have a few years ago, but that doesn't mean that the threat has diminished. It's actually increased because the threats are becoming more damaging when they do occur, when the ransomware attacks occur. Just some other things have kind of taken over the news cycle with a couple of wars going on and elections coming up in the United States here. That's kind of taken over the major news outlets. But in our world, in our news feeds, we're seeing multiple breaches that are newsworthy every single day in our news feeds here. You may have seen just recently one of the major distributors of ransomware, a group called Locket, was taken down by the FBI. They took down all their sites. And yesterday it was announced that after a few days of being down, they were right back at it. So the FBI was successful in shutting them down for 3 or 4 days. That's it. And they're right back at it. Another story concerning ransomware from December, another major ransomware outfit, their sites were taken down by the FBI. They announced that proudly, that they had disrupted this ransomware ring. Following day, they went to look at the site to evaluate it and see what they could learn from it. It was gone. The cyber hackers had stolen it right out from under the FBI's nose. So that just shows you what we're dealing with here. Unfortunately, these malicious actors have been quite successful in their trade. They've earned a lot of money, not earned, but stolen a lot of money, and they're using that to bolster their efforts and hone their craft. More statistics here. According to a study from Surfshark, almost 50 million US accounts were breached in Q2 of 2023 alone. And this last one, according to Armis Research, 1 out of every 3 businesses globally experienced multiple security breaches last year. So here's a couple of headlines. You can see that I put this presentation together originally in October here. All I did was search for construction breaches this week. And these two popped up. I could do that in pretty much any vertical, pretty much any week, and come up with some major headlines of breaches that are occurring. I just happened to pick construction because I know we have some folks in the construction field on this call here. Here are 2 big ones, and that was just that one particular week. So as I said, the first thing I do every morning when I get up is I look through my news feed, my cybersecurity news feed, and see what's there. What a great way to start the day with news like that. But like I said, I could pick pretty much any vertical you want and come up with headlines for any particular week that you want, because they're happening every single day. So here's what's changing. And I'm going to close out our poll question. Sorry, I forgot to close that out, but it looks like everybody does have cybersecurity insurance. That's a good thing. Okay. So nation-state actors are increasingly targeting US-based businesses, and this is according to the FBI and Google, and they expect that to continue throughout this year. Now, it's nothing new that countries like Iran, North Korea, China, Russia, they've always targeted the US, but they've usually targeted our infrastructure. And you may or may not have seen in the news recently that the CISO, which is a government agency, announced they had found some Chinese spyware hidden inside our critical infrastructure. It was there for 5 years. It was dormant for 5 years before they even noticed it, just waiting to be activated in the case that they wanted to. That's frightening. Not coincidentally, or maybe it was coincidentally, I don't know, but just 2 days ago, CISA announced new guidelines for those that are in the water management critical infrastructure sector. I find it hard to believe that that's a coincidence that a week before they discover the spyware and then a week later come out with some new guidelines, but maybe it is. But what's changing, I mean, that's always been happening, right? We've always had Chinese companies trying to steal intellectual property. What we're seeing now is these bad actors, usually at the behest of nation states, are trying to do damage. They're not even trying to steal information. They're trying to hack in and just do damage, delete things, crash things. It's really cyber warfare when you think about it. It's no longer just an abstract thought. This stuff is happening today. So there's an uptick in that targeting US-based businesses in particular. There's also the Google study also noted that hacktivism attacks have been on the rise in 2023. Just folks looking for attention, more or less. But the summary here is that the geopolitical climate is pretty unstable right now, and US businesses are not reaping the benefits of that at all. Okay, on this slide, sometimes you see statistics and you see numbers, and they're just numbers. But this one just made my jaw drop and it makes me wonder what the calculation was. But according to Cybersecurity Ventures, the global cost of cybercrime was estimated to be $8 trillion in 2023 with a T, and estimated to grow to over 10 trillion by 2025. That to me, that just made my jaw drop. That's twice the GDP of the United States. Makes me wonder where that number is coming from. But the fact that somebody could calculate that is pretty staggering. So I do know for certainty that ransomware has made hackers wealthy. I just put a Facebook post out for Cold & Company today, that statistic where they calculated known ransom payments were over $1 billion in 2023. That's just the ones that you know about. So I'm quite certain that that number is much, much, much higher of all the businesses that didn't report paying the ransom to get their data back. And as I mentioned earlier, they're using that money to perfect their craft. As the FBI has infiltrated some of these organizations, they're run like corporations. They have HR departments for recruiting. They have sales departments with quotas and goals. They have research and development departments so that they can make their malware harder to detect and more damaging. And as I mentioned, the attacks are becoming more sophisticated and from multiple attack vectors. So we could continue on setting the stage here with more statistics and more scary numbers, but I don't think we're going to find much disagreement about the state of cybersecurity today. It is a dangerous place, as dangerous as I've ever seen it. And I haven't even mentioned artificial intelligence yet. and I'll probably bypass that today, but it's really made the hackers' jobs much, much easier to quickly modify malware so that it gets past firewalls and antivirus. AI is a tool for bad guys as well as good guys, unfortunately. So let's move on to compliance and the state of compliance. So governments are requiring cybersecurity standards to be in place for several industries. Healthcare, financial services, that's not new. HIPAA has been around for a while. What's different is that businesses now must have someone on staff responsible for cybersecurity according to many state PII statutes, which is personally identifiable information statutes or privacy statutes. So much like in the past with Sarbanes-Oxley, where CEOs and CFOs were required to sign on to the company financials, cybersecurity legislation is now requiring the same thing. They're requiring someone's throat to choke, so to speak, within an organization. So that would be a security officer, right? So why don't you just go out and hire a qualified CISO, Chief Information Security Officer? Well, you can. According to salary.com, the average salary for a CISO is about $240,000 a year. But look at bullet point number 2. Average tenure, not even 2 years. And I think that has to do primarily with bullet point number 3, which is that there is a shortage of security professionals out there. Channel Futures estimates that to be 3 million globally, with 1 million of those being in the United States. So if you're a financial services company in the state of New York, as an example, you are required to have a CISO. With the shortage of that, these guys are likely jumping around, chasing the dollar here, so they don't stay long. But someone in the organization has to have that responsibility for many of these state statutes of being in charge of cybersecurity. So who is that person in your organization? So I want you to take a minute to think about that. Who is that person inside your organization? Because that's a pretty important person, right? With the threats out there, that's someone that's key to your organization. While you're thinking about that, I'm going to throw up a couple more headlines here. The SEC sued SolarWinds and its CISO personally, saying that they ignored flaws that led to a major hack. That's not something we've seen in the past. Normally, lawsuits would target the business. In this case, they targeted the CISO individually. The SEC claimed negligence and failure to report the breach in a timely manner. Second headline here, 5 former Methodist hospital employees plead guilty to HIPAA violations. The employees, not just the hospital. That's something that's different. So in this case, those folks had given out patient information to third parties. One of the 5 actually received some jail time and the others fines. Who wants to be a CISO now, right? Compliance standards are increasing year over year. So recently, the FTC safeguards expanded its coverage. HIPAA was updated back in 2020. The state PII laws are updated year over year. Virginia, California, Colorado, Connecticut, they were all updated in 2023. Texas, Montana, Oregon, theirs were effective in 2024. Just earlier this week, New Jersey passed their new PII law. It goes into effect in 2025. That was just signed into law earlier this week. So the question is, person that I asked you to come up with in the last slide, who's responsible for cybersecurity in your organization, are they aware of these changes? They should be, right? I'm going to throw up a second poll question here. Just kind of overall, how prepared is your business to take on the security challenges of the future? So go ahead and answer that, and I'll finish off this slide here. Cybersecurity insurance requirements have been increasing year over year. You've probably noticed that. Years ago, you had to have multi-factor authentication for email, and that's it. Well, now you have to have multi-factor for email, for VPN, for admin accounts. You have to have an incident response plan. So year over year, the insurance carriers are requiring more and more to bind their coverage. So that's also a factor in this. Now, the bottom line is, we talked about in the beginning, the cybersecurity landscape is pretty scary. It's the reason we go to so many conferences and keep up with the compliance standards, because there's a lot to keep up on. So looking at our poll questions here, looks like the majority of folks are in category B here. Nobody has said well prepared, interestingly enough. All right, I'm going to close that out, and I'm going to move on to make the case for partnering. Okay, I think we're probably in agreement that businesses should have a qualified person protecting the business from cybersecurity threats. Partnering is a great solution when you don't have that skill set in-house. So CISA, I hate to keep throwing acronyms around here, but CISA is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. It's a government agency. They recommend that businesses with 50 or more employees have a CISO on staff, a Chief Information Security Officer. So looking back in time, let's go back 20, 25 years, a lot of businesses didn't even have a technology officer, right? But over time, that permeated. Started with the big companies. Now most major corporations have a technology officer. The same pattern is happening with CISOs because of the security threats that are out there. You can bet your bottom dollar that Fortune 500 companies have CISOs. That's going to filter on down to the mid-size and eventually smaller businesses over time. So a fractional CISO is a great solution for SMB that does not need or cannot afford a full-time CISO. So you've probably all heard of a fractional CFO, right? It's a part-time where they handle multiple customers. That's what we're talking about here today, and that we wanted to introduce the concept to you. So vCISO just stands for Virtual Chief Information Security Officer. A CISO is responsible for assessing the risk and aligning the company's security posture. So what we're talking about here when we talk about this is really a position, not necessarily a W-2 position, but an outsourced position. So you may be on this call thinking, well, we already work with Cold and Company. You guys already do this for us. Not at this level. And I'm going to make an analogy for you, and my team hates this analogy. They tell me it doesn't work, but for some reason it resonates with me, and I'm going to try it anyway. So I'm going to try to make the comparison like this. So if if you have a new baby and you want to get that baby home from the hospital, if you ask your IT company, hey, build me something that's going to get my baby home from the hospital, they're going to come up with a car. If you ask your CISO, hey, build me something to get my baby home from the hospital, he's going to build you a car seat because his mindset is about security, whereas in IT, we're more concerned with functionality. The two obviously have to work together. You have to put the car seat in the car, so there has to be some working together there, but it's really about the mindset of the role. The Chief Information Security Officer has to have security in mind with everything that you do. So what we're introducing here is really a position that's going to be talking to your executives, talking to your management, and it's a fractional position, meaning part-time or remote working. It's going to be a lot more affordable that way. So what will this do for you? So I'm going to have a slide of each one of these bullet points here, but in general, it's going to reduce your cybersecurity risk, going to protect your overall critical data and systems. We're going to bring the expertise of a group of trained security professionals. That's an important point. Yes, there will be a point person, but you're going to have a team of people behind that person. We're going to collaborate with your executive team, and we're going to document security plans and incidences. So we'll start with bullet point number 1, reducing your cyber risk. As I mentioned, the CISO has an eye on security. You want to implement a new system? Great. Let's evaluate it for risk, not just for functionality. That's the CISO's role. We want to be involved in those conversations early rather than after the fact. So we want to be communicating with your executives and your management team. What kinds of things are you looking at? Let's evaluate those things for risk. The vCISO will review security reports, whether they're from third-party vendors or from internal security reports. For everybody on this call, we're your IT already. The person that's going to generate the report will be someone different than who reviews it. And in some cases, there are things that we won't do. So an example of that would be a penetration test, where you try to look at a business from the outside, see what vulnerabilities are there, and try to exploit them. We feel that's like checking our own homework if we're the ones implementing the security and then doing the check. We're going to have some bias and some blind spots to what we're doing. So there's certain things that it makes sense for us to be on both sides of that fence, the security and the IT side. There's some things where it doesn't. Pen test is one of those examples. Of course, we're going to protect your critical data and systems. So our program comes with a subscription to our Compliance Manager software. So it's going to help you build towards any compliance with any regulations that you might have to comply with, FTC standards or HIPAA or whatever it happens to be. Now, some of you may not have a particular industry regulation that you need to adhere to, and that's okay. But there are some great generic standards out there from NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and CIS, which is the Center for Internet Security, that really apply to all businesses. And let me explain why it's good to follow those standards, even though you may not have a particular regulation. So of course, following those is going to increase your data security and your documentation. A lot of the state PII laws are not specific. So some of them are. So if you're on this call, I know some of you are in New York. New York State Shield Act is very specific. You have to have a compliance officer. You have to have cybersecurity training. It bullet points what you need. Other states don't have that. I'm talking to you from Florida. Florida just says that businesses have to take reasonable precautions. As more and more states update their statutes, they're getting more and more specific. But right now in Florida, that's all it says. You could look at that in a couple of ways. You could say, yeah, that's great. I don't have to have a CISO. I don't have to have a security program. I don't have to do cybersecurity training. Until you have a breach, right? And then when you get some type of an audit, the state gets involved, they're going to look at that and say, whatever you were doing was not reasonable enough because you got breached. And you've got nothing to fight back with, and the fines will come. If you get breached, but you can point to the fact that, hey, we've been following the NIST cybersecurity framework or the CIS framework, those are respected frameworks that are going to give you some leverage to fight against those things. So that's another reason why it's good to follow a standard. And as part of our program here, we're going to develop that roadmap. We're going to pick the standards that apply to your organization and then help you build towards compliance. Notice that says build towards. We don't have to go from 0 to 100 overnight. We have the freedom in following a standard to develop they're called POAMs, plan of action with milestones. So maybe this particular thing that they're saying we don't have, but it's going to cost us a lot of money. You don't have to do that right away. Put that in your plan of action. All right, that's going to be something down the road that we're going to do in 2025. That shows that you're doing your due diligence. So we're going to develop that roadmap with you. We're going to bring the expertise of a group of trained security professionals. I always say many minds are better than one. Security is a very big field, and we've got folks that come from different industries. We have a gentleman that worked in municipality, so he's got that kind of government experience. We have those a lot in the construction field. Financial services. So we have different individuals with different experience that we can bring to the table. I'll probably be the guy reviewing cyber insurance contracts. That's something that I have a lot of experience with. So all of you on this call are Colden customers, but you may only know a portion of our team. There's probably your account manager, some folks that you work with regularly, and you may not be familiar with our whole team. We've got some pretty good folks on staff here to bring to the table. So that's what you're getting. You're not just getting a person, you're getting a team of security trained professionals. We've also got a bunch of guys actually right now undergoing security training as well. Important point here is this position should collaborate with your executive team. Open lines of communication. Your executive team should feel comfortable coming to us with questions. We're going to give your executives cybersecurity training that's specific for them. Because let's face it, executives are a target. Those are the people that other people listen to. Even if a technician out in the field or somebody lower in the organization gets compromised, what the bad guys are doing is they're looking for information on those executives because they know they're the ones that can order a wire transfer. They're the ones that can order a check be cut. So those are the folks that the bad guys are after. So we're going to give specialized training to the executives. We're going to do dark web monitoring to see if your accounts have been put up on the dark web for sale, as an example. We can monitor those things. And we're going to have a state of cybersecurity report. In addition to a written report, we'll also do a webinar like this where we kind of go over that with your executives annually. So that engagement is key to the success of this program. And last but not least, we're going to document your security plans and any incidences. I always like to say you can be secure without documentation, but you cannot be compliant. If we use HIPAA as an example, you have to train your folks on what it means to be HIPAA compliant. It's not enough just to have the program in place that trains your folks. You actually have to have it in your company handbook that says we do this. You have to have the documentation in order to be fully compliant. So we're going to be doing that with you. continuous updating of the incident response plans and disaster recovery plans. Again, you may be looking at this saying, hey, you know what, Cold & Company already did this. What do I need this vCISO for? Well, essentially, we're just kind of shifting that job from one bucket to another. But the reality is these things need to be updated regularly. Yes, we've probably written incident response plans to satisfy cybersecurity insurance for a lot of you. But things change. People change in your business. Your systems that you use change. The threats that are out there change. Keeping these updated means it's more likely going to be effective for you should you need it, should you have an incident. So we're going to keep those up to date. We're going to document your compliance standing and, of course, document any security incidents should they happen. Okay, let's summarize this here. The cybersecurity landscape is as dangerous as it's ever been, and businesses have a responsibility to safeguard data, and in some cases, a legal obligation for certain data. Growing regulations are holding businesses, and now we're seeing individuals accountable for breaches. And the question is, does your business have the expertise in-house to combat that, or is partnering an option for you? So if you've been on any of my webinars over the years, you know that I always end with this saying here. If you're running your business the same way you were 2 or 3 years ago, you're not staying the same, you're falling behind. And that was originally meant as a technology quote, because technology is changing, but it certainly applies in security. The threats that are out there today are not the same ones we had 2 or 3 years ago. So your defenses have to be staying up with them, or else you're falling behind, in this case, falling behind the bad guys. So underestimate the threat at your own risk, right? Okay, so I wanted to leave a couple minutes for questions here. Go ahead and type any questions that you may have in the Q&A, and I'm just going to let you know kind of what we feel are the next steps here. We're going to follow up with you individually, maybe next week sometime, give you some time to think about this, to see if we've piqued your interest at all. Does it make sense what we're talking about here? Certainly the trend of the vCISO service is a major one in our field. We're seeing it more and more because of the necessity. And as I mentioned, we've really been stepping up our game here, sending a lot of guys to training on cybersecurity, upping the tools that we're using here to help keep you guys safe. So I don't see any questions, which is fine. It's a small group here today. Let me put my contact information up. And what I'll do is I'll follow up with each of you individually next week, give you some time to digest what we've kind of thrown at you here to see if it's worth having a discussion moving forward. So with that, I will thank you all for taking time out of your busy day to attend. I really appreciate it. We do want to kind of raise the flag a little bit on the threats that are out there and hopefully help keep you all safe, okay? Thanks very much. Have a great day.